Welcome to Travel Buddy, presented by Switchfly. In this podcast, we talk about all things travel, rewards, and loyalty. Let's get to it.
Today, we're talking about what makes a travel incentive program best in class. And today, we're featuring yet another episode with Nowell Outlaw, CEO of Switchfly. Now, you have a guest appearance on a panel coming up at the IMA in later July. So IMA is Incentive
Correct.
Marketing Association. And so please look forward to that. There might be some content coming around there on Tuesday, July 21st, talking about designing a best-in-class incentive and recognition program, amongst other experts on the panel. And so today, you may hear a little bit of construction. We both have construction going on in our places of business.
Correct.
So if you don't hear that, great. But what I wanted to talk to you about really briefly, Nowell, if you could define for us how you would classify, categorize, or define a travel incentive program. What do you mean by that? Or what do those words mean to you?
You know, it's really kind of end-to-end travel redemption engine, right? So if I want to go to Hawaii, if I want to stay in Hawaii, I want to rent a car in Hawaii, I want to, do scuba diving in Hawaii, like it's comprehensive kind of end to end when you think about everything that's connected to travel, that I want to be able to plug all those things into my incentive system to incentivize people to redeem for those rewards.
Okay. Now, to build a program like that, I'm sure you get lots of people saying like, oh, well, Claude can do that, or I could vibe code my way to building a travel incentive program. And Nowell is like, yes, sure, but maybe. What would you say?
I think people underestimate the complexities of travel, right? And travel is actually legally regulated, right? So you can't just go and open up a travel shop, right? I guess you can, but if you want to have, sell things in Hawaii, you need to have a bank account in Hawaii. If you want to do things in California, you got to have a bank account in California. All right. So there's specific state regulatory rules just from being a travel agency. If you do it in Europe, there's insurance and there's all this other stuff. So no amount of vibe coding is going to get you away from the regulatory frameworks that have been in and around travel, which has been this way for 25 years, right? And then the second tier becomes, well, who's going to be your supply partner? Right. And how much are they going to want to be your partner? Right. So pick up the phone, call Expedia. They might not call you back. Right. And Expedia is one of our partners. They're awesome. Right. But if you're a smaller incentive program, they don't necessarily have the resources to bring you on board and really be your partner the way you want them to be your partner. Right. So, and then you start adding the complexities of multiple hotels, flights, cars, all these other things, and the accreditation that's required and legal stuff that's required behind the scenes to do that. It's a big lift to build travel.
We have had a couple of episodes talking about some of that complexity, but I wanted to lead with that because when you're thinking about designing the best-in-class travel program, I'm sure a lot of leaders that are listening to this episode or will be in attendance at IMA in a couple of weeks are thinking like, yeah, I've got all this great vision. And then, of course, there's these new tech advancements in AI. Maybe I could build some things. But I wanted to lead with that because best-in-class is within certain constraints, within the technological environment, but then regulatory environment, within budgets, within what you can do with data and privacy and analytics and so on. So I'm glad you're on the same page with just the amount of just the grunt work that you guys have put in for decades, building these kind of programs. That this is not easy to do. So within that, when we're thinking about designing a perfect program, best-in-class program, what does that mean to you? What does best-in-class actually look like when you have a fixed budget and it's not an ideal scenario, but it's something that you're within the line item within your business and you're trying to grow your business, of course, but you got constraints. What are the things that you would recommend focusing on for that in that constrained environment for some of these leaders?
I think it's really understanding your consumer and what you're trying to get done, right? Because not all programs are equal, right? And the construction's really going now. If you think about someone who has a platinum card with American Express is much different than someone who only has $10 in points from their gas station, right? Or from the coffee shop. And so, once you understand the dynamics of your program, then you have to measure, what am I going to get the strongest ROI from? Right. And that's for points redemption for those consumers, because, I can offer, as an example, air as a program, right, in travel. But if my consumers aren't really traveling and they don't really fit that profile, I've just offered something for nothing, right? And there is work that has to be done to support that program, right? Both marketing, whoever you use, you have to build the integration and do this stuff. But where is the value add for the consumer, right? It could be, that for your consumer profile, that just offering activities or tickets or, things like that makes more sense for your consumers. And that could be quick, right? Because, if you pushed out we're only going to do 5-star hotels and your consumer base really is 3-star hotel people, it's going to be a flop, right? And so that's where I think I'm landing on that.
Okay. So maybe I'll skip ahead a bit and talk about the data that you might have on some of these consumers. So I know, in order to create a great program, everything needs to be personalized. But maybe you have limited data resources or a data team. How do you categorize? How do you think about how to find out what some of the consumers might like, or I don't know, how do you even go about finding that out?
Well, that's hard. I mean, a lot of people can buy, third-party data sources to understand more about a consumer, and that does help. I mean, you can understand what kind of car they drive and where they live, and the zip code and those types of things, and so you can very quickly aggregate more data around a person, and that helps you drive recommendations for the consumer, right? And I think it's if you don't have access to tools like that, you are very limited in what you can do. And so it comes down to, in some cases, just a best guess, right? So it's like, look, we're running the loyalty program and it's for Foods, right? Well, there's a certain consumer profile that shops at Whole Foods, right? It's just a natural thing. Most people, who are not pinching pennies shop at Whole Foods, right? If I'm shopping at the lower end chain grocery stores, that's a different kind of consumer, right? And so just understanding my loyalty program that I'm actually running might help me align with what value I need to be offering to the consumer themselves, right? And in those markets, right? So the Whole Foods shopper, doing price slash through and discounting and all those things might not be as important than a consumer who is more price sensitive, right? And it just depends on where you are in that spectrum.
What data you have access to and how you kind of, think about that persona.
Correct.
Related to that is, IT teams. A lot of these teams have to work with IT, procurement, whatever that might look like, but you got to get inside the roadmap, which could be, if not the largest obstacle or challenge, one of the big challenges that somebody would face. How do you think about creating a best-in-class program when you've got a best-in-class idea, but you need to get in front of IT, or you need to get on the roadmap, or you need to integrate somehow with, some of the larger infrastructure that they might have in an organization?
Well, one, that's kind of why Switchfly exists as a company that, we basically bring an easy to bolt on complete end-to-end travel solution for someone. So you can do it very quickly without a massive IT lift, right? I think I literally have a call in 30 minutes with someone who they want to build it themselves. And it's like, I'm not sure you guys understand the complexity of this, right? And if you really think about, let's just forget everything else. Let's just go deep on air and the requirements and compliance for air regulation. And that's where you go, are you going to hire someone who is an air expert in all of the rules that you have to maintain, display to the consumer in order to be legal? Because if you're not, you're going to have a big problem, right? And just that makes you realize there's the IT investment, but there's these other supporting roles that also become mandatory, right? To make sure that you're staying in legal compliance with market trends and things like that. So, yeah, getting an API and we got a great deal is one way to go, but there's a whole nother layer that comes into play. And I actually think that the compliance layer, the fraud layer, all of those things are much more complicated than just the IT layer.
So what I'm hearing, the emphasis is a marketing team with Claude Code is not going to build a great program.
I mean, you might have a great looking thing, right? Yeah. But when you think about card processing, it doesn't matter if it's travel or not. There are mandatory requirements in credit card processing that you have to pay attention to. So you better budget for hiring someone who is your merchant processing analyst who works for you, right? Add $100,000, right? If it's onshore, just for that, right? Or 2 people. In travel, unfortunately, travel is in the same category as selling drugs online. It's crazy hard. Merchant processors take a very hard look at the risk profile of who's selling the travel, right?
Really?
And just because it's ridiculous. And it's understood because of COVID and all the cancellations and all those things. But, if you think, we're going to build this API, the first person I would call before I lifted a finger in building something would be to call my merchant processor and say, hey, what's going to happen if I add travel to my merchant processing ability, right? And understand the rules that you have to follow, because you now are placed in a high risk category. And that can be eye-opening.
Gosh. Okay. We're drawing on your years of experience in this field.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct.
No.
Where the merchant processor will say things like, okay, we're going to hold back 35% of your cart until the booking's complete. So if you're booking things and they're 30, 60, 90, 120 days in the future, your merchant processor is going to hold 35% of that spend until the travel is actually completed.
Wow.
No questions. So, you're not going to get it back.
Is it kind of related to what you were saying earlier about working with some of these large vendors? You've got to be kind of trusted before you can move into that network, before they really maybe not move you out of that high risk, but they start to trust you to move ahead with the transactions that you're doing. Oh,
correct.
Gosh.
Correct.
Yeesh. Okay.
Yeah. You really, you have to have people that's all they do is they monitor and pay attention to, what's happening in your credit card ecosystem. And it's like, if you're selling merchandise, it's one thing. Travel is it's a whole different animal, and most people don't understand it. Right.
Okay. I want to dive into that for a second. Talking about, you mentioned an air consultant earlier. You've got vendors regarding merchant processors. You've got other kind of vendors that might be involved. How do you think about relationships within a best-in-class travel incentive program?
You have to work with them. The truth is, if you're a small redemption partner, do you even have an account rep? Right? It's really hard. These companies are big. They're great companies. But if you're super small, sometimes things are really hard to get fixed, right? And even, we're not massive, right? And sometimes we struggle with getting attention that we need. But, when you're, if you're a small program, I don't think you're going to get the help that you really need in order to get this stuff done.
Okay. One thing I wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit is thinking about best in class travel incentive program end to end. What in your mind is, let's say all the constraints are off, budget is off. What are the things that you think are really valuable to create that kind of best in class program? I know everybody listening has a budget, they've got these constraints, but if you were to design like the ideal program based on your experience, what does that look like for you?
I think it's one, don't constrain the consumer, right? So, the best programs that we run have both, the earn aspect. So if I redeem or if I do top up, I can get more points, right? Which is interesting. But it's also one of, you're not going to be able to identify where the consumer wants to go or what they want to do. So you have to make sure you show up with a complete solution, right? If you show up with, we just do hotels, that might work, but it might be frustrating for consumers because on other program sites, they've got the full spectrum of products available to them, right? And so, you need to think about, should we offer a car rental? Should we offer events? Should we offer activities? Should we offer, insurance on travel, right? Which is super simple until you understand that most insurance for travel doesn't want to redeem for points, right? And so you have to figure out how to have an insurance carrier redeem for points. That took a year, by the way, for those people playing at home. That took a year to solve for us. Just the one thing about insurance and points.
I can imagine somebody listening to this thinking, they're a travel leader, loyalty leader, wanted to think about their incentive programs and thinking, wow, Nowell's making this sound like it's really hard. What do I do? What advice or encouragement would you have to people thinking about designing these programs? Because what I'm hearing is, this is really complex stuff. You've got to be big enough.
It's super complex.
And you've got to have enough, relationships and trust, and you've got to have this kind of expertise at almost every level and build out like the full suite. I mean, that's
correct.
What do I do with that?
It's really hard. I mean, that's why programs like, American Express, they have whole teams that just work on this, right? At these enterprise like scales of, the Capital Ones of the world and the banks that you think about, like the credit cards. But, in loyalty programs directly, that's why people use people like Switchfly because, we have whatever 160 people and we understand travel. And most loyalty programs don't understand travel. And they think they do until about the third meeting, and then they realize they don't understand travel, right? Which is good for us, not good for them. And we end up doing a lot of education about, why this is hard.
What encouragement would you have other than obviously like call Nowell and the team at Switchfly and like talk about it? But I mean, what do you hope to leave, the audience with to say like, this stuff is really hard, it's complicated, but if you're going to design a best in class program, I would absolutely be going down this road.
I think travel is aspirational for people, right? And it changes how people think of the program, right? So a lot of people who talk, they're like, well, we have gift cards and merchandise. And it's like, that's great, but people don't blogs about their gift cards, right? And so if you want to change that relationship with the consumer into more of a emotional one, travel can definitely do that for you, right? And that's, people remember their last trip. We just had a management meeting here internally, and I basically asked people like, hey, everyone tell me about your last gift card. And no one could remember their last gift card, right? Hey, tell me about your last trip. Boom, 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 right? And so, that's why, right? Because people remember, I got this trip from this, right? And we have customer examples of consumers basically posting on their sites internally, on the loyalty program sites, saying, I saved my points for 9 months in order to take this trip to Disneyland, and I had the best time possible, and it was such an emotional thing. Thank you, loyalty program, for letting me take this trip, right? You don't necessarily get that stuff with those other program categories.
Yeah, that's a whole, the brand experience and the brand equity that you build over time with customers. So maybe the question is, and maybe I'm not phrasing this right, but it's kind of, if you think going up the source of the idea, the leadership chain, the aspirations of the business, like it's kind of you're kind of putting it in a different category of thinking about aspiration or thinking about loyalty in a different way. Not so much the mechanics of the program really, but it's more like, who do we want to be as a brand, and how do we want our customers to think about us? Is that a fair
Correct.
assumption? Like, this is going to take an investment. This is complex. This is hard work.
Correct.
You can't just kind of, this isn't a crapshoot. You got to think long and hard about this and who you want to be as a brand. Is that fair to say?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, what values do you want to bring to your ecosystem, right? And, do you want, we have program partners that the hotels, as an example, are only 4 and 5 star hotels. They don't even offer, we typically don't offer 1 and 2 stars, but they're like, we don't even want to do 3-star hotels because they understand the profile of their consumer, right? And those consumers are more focused on redeeming lots and lots of points for really, usually it's 5-star hotels, right? In order to redeem. And so, it becomes brand association with value that you're bringing to the table for them, right? And mapping that too. And I think the other thing that is always important, especially when evaluating travel, is it's not necessarily, we've talked about this before, there's the initial shopping, right? And let's say, you are focused on those 4 and 5-star consumers, right? They're really focused on that. What you don't want to end up in a program that when something goes bump in the night and they pick up the phone and they try to call, that the answer is, please call back in 48 hours.
Yep. I've had that.
Because that is a brand blower, right? And brands, for loyalty in particular, they have to pay attention to the servicing side. They have to do it. And I think that most people miss that. And it's kind of like an afterthought. And you have to really understand that if you're selling to people who, are driving Mercedes and BMWs and things like that, when they go to the service center, they're taken care of. When they're taking a 5-star vacation to, wherever, Turks and Caicos, and they're there and something goes wrong, they don't want to wait for 48 hours to get a phone call back. Like, they want something immediate, right? And so, ensuring your travel program is set up to offer that is also critically important.
Maybe that's the takeaway with this is when you're thinking about a best-in-class travel incentive program, you're thinking about travel specifically, it has this other emotional value to consumers that other programs may not have, and it's important to pay attention to that. But it's hard to do. So you got to think way upstream and think bigger about what you're doing as a brand and your loyalty and your experience overall. And then make sure that that support is there, because these people care a lot while they're on their trip. If I could tie it all together.
For sure. And make sure that, whoever you're aligned with vendor-wise has that same alignment with you. If you don't have that, it's going to be a failure, right? So.
Okay. Very helpful. Anything else that you want to leave customers with, leaders with, people listening on the show, maybe attending the IMA in a couple of weeks when you're on the panel? Anything that comes to mind?
We'll be there. Yeah, we'll be at the show, and it'll be fun to meet people and see. It's an interesting time in travel, and people at the beginning of the year, people are worried about, are people traveling? Are people doing this? I can tell you, having been to the airport yesterday morning, the travel is booming. It's absolutely crazy.
I just went to South Africa a couple of weeks ago, and everywhere I went, like 4 different airports, it was just packed to the gills. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. It's not, I don't think any of our loyalty customers are down year over year. They're all growing with points redemption and travel.
Amazing. Okay. So it's the golden age of travel still, despite oil prices.
It is. Despite oil prices. Well, the thing about oil prices, which is so interesting, is that consumers, because the price of air tickets and things have gone up, they're more inclined to use more of their points.
That is so true. Actually, that's true for me. I'm planning a trip. It's kind of spontaneous. And I'm like, maybe I should open up a new credit card. Yeah, I mean, and I haven't thought that in years, but that's for sure on my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Here's 90,000 free miles so that you can go to when the plane ticket is $900 to go round trip, you're like, man, I'll take the 90,000 miles.
It's literally almost exactly that, to go to Rome. And my 3-year-old, I have to pay for her now. Unfortunately, she's no longer free. So, I might open up a credit card.
There it
Well,
is.
Noel, thank you so much. For those of you listening and want more resources like this, it's switchfly.com. The team has put together a lot more episodes, a lot more guides and blogs and resources to help your travel incentive program. But as always, you can catch Noel out and about, and he's going to be at IMA in a couple of weeks on July 21st with a panel, and we'll have more content to follow after that. Noel, always a pleasure to talk with you, and hope you have a great day.
Great. Thanks, Brian.